Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and esteemed participants, as we commence our proceedings, may I request everyone to rise for the national anthem, a symbol of unity and pride that resonates with the spirit of our nation. Following the national anthem, we will continue with a moment of reverence and invite you all to stand once again for the doxology to be performed by soprano Mia Ariana P. Tanchonco and pianist Richelle Rivera.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Everything
Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, ambassadors, the diplomatic corps, and esteemed participants, a pleasant morning of peace and solidarity. The commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is not a mere reflection on history, but a resounding call to action for the future. It is important that we redouble our efforts in promoting human rights, particularly in the face of ongoing conflicts that challenge the very essence of our shared values. It is with great honor and privilege that we introduce our distinguished guest speakers for today, the Honorable Enrique A. Manalo and the Honorable Ores Novosad. Let's all give them a big round of applause, a warm welcome to the hosts of the Philippine Women's University. Today's event will begin to unfold under the esteemed leadership of Mr. Marco Alfredo M. Benitez, the President of the Philippine Women's University, who will now grace us with a welcome address, extending his heartfelt greetings to each one present. Let's give him a big round of applause.
Honorable Secretary Enrique A. Manalo, Honorable Ores Novosad, our distinguished speakers, Your Excellencies, heads of foreign delegations, esteemed guests, members of the faculty, students, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, the administration, faculty, and students of PWU, it is my great honor and privilege to welcome all of you to this historic occasion, a commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the UN General Assembly on December 10, 1948. My heartfelt appreciation and congratulations to the organizers, our Helena Z. Benitez School of International Relations and Diplomacy, under the able leadership of Ambassador Rosario G. Manalo, for staging this milestone event. I am also thrilled to acknowledge the presence here today not only of the Philippines' current Secretary of Foreign Affairs, the Honorable Enrique A. Manalo, and distinguished members of the Diplomatic Corps, but also of a career international diplomat, Mr. Ores Novosad, Chief of the Groups in Focus Section, Human Rights Treaty Bodies Branch of the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, who traveled all the way from Geneva, Switzerland to be with us today. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is arguably one of the greatest documents of all time, comparable to the Charter of the United Nations itself. It codified the basic principle that all men, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, gender, or national origin, etc., are born equal and endowed with certain inalienable rights, among which are the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We Filipinos should be doubly proud as we celebrate this momentous occasion, since a Filipino diplomat, the late General Carlos P. Romulo, who served multiple terms as Philippine Ambassador to the United States and as permanent representative of the Philippines to the United Nations, was one of the key architects of the UDHR, along with the former First Lady of the United States, Eleanor Roosevelt. I'd also like to recognize the members of the Romulo family present here today. Attorney Ricardo Romulo, Mrs. Olivia M. Romulo, Ms. Alessandra Romulo Scilantini, and Ms. Maria Cristina M. Romulo. Thank you for being here. As a historical note, while the UDHR was being debated in the UN General Assembly and General Carlos P. Romulo was defending the draft document, CPR, as he was known, had to endure diatribes from the likes of Andrew Wyszynski, the USSR's pugnacious envoy to the world body at that time, who liked to remind CPR that he was just a little man from a little country, to which General Carlos P. Romulo reportedly countered, "I may be a little man from a little country, but it is the duty of the little Davids of this world to fling the pebbles of truth in the eyes of the blustering Goliaths to force them to behave." And the Goliaths apparently behaved because the UDHR passed with 50 votes in favor, no votes against, and 8 abstentions. Even the Goliath USSR abstained. We hope that today's event will provide us the impetus to integrate courses on human rights and international humanitarian law into our programs through the HCB School of International Relations and Diplomacy. Who knows? An actual degree program in this field may not be so far-fetched an idea later on. So once again, welcome to the Philippine Women's University and a pleasant morning to everyone.
Thank you very much, President Marco, for that insightful and eloquent opening address. Your words have set the tone for this meaningful gathering. And to amplify our message of promoting human rights and fostering a deeper understanding of a shared commitment to justice and equality, I'm honored to invite Dr. Benjamin N. Muego, a full professor in OIC of the Helena C. Benitez School of International Relations and Diplomacy and advisor of the PWU Student Diplomatic Corps, to deliver the opening remarks and officially introduce our guest speakers.
Thank you very much, Harvey. Secretary Manalo, Excellencies, Attorney Ricardo Romulo, and other members of the Romulo family, President Marco Benitez, Vice President and Provost Dr. Felina Young, distinguished guests, members of the faculty, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the adoption by the UN General Assembly of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, arguably one of the greatest documents of all time. As the Universal Declaration of Human Rights intones in the very first paragraph of its preamble, the inherent dignity and the equal, inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. In my humble opinion, this celebration would ring hollow if we failed to acknowledge and recognize the pivotal role played by a Filipino diplomat, the late General Carlos P. Romulo, the Philippines' permanent representative to the United Nations at the time, and an original signatory of the United Nations Charter in the crafting together of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. On a personal note, I am humbled beyond belief to acknowledge that as a young student leader in 1964-65, when General Carlos P. Romulo was president of the University of the Philippines, I had the great honor of finding myself in the physical presence of General Romulo on many occasions and became a grateful recipient of many of his blessings, including an all-paid-for debating tour of the United States in 1966. For all that, I will always be grateful and forever beholden to the Romulo family. And now, to the next part of the program, my honor to introduce the first guest speaker. So once again, Secretary Manalo, Excellencies, Attorney Romulo, and other members of the Romulo family, President Marco Benitez, Vice President and Provost Dr. Felina Young, distinguished guests, members of the faculty, ladies and gentlemen. Enrique A. Manalo is the first career diplomat to serve as Secretary of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of the Philippines in nearly 2 decades. He also just happens to be the son of 2 retired ambassadors extraordinary and plenipotentiary, Armando Manalo, the late Ambassador Armando Manalo, and Ambassador Rosario G. Manalo, Dean of PWU's Helena Z. Benitez School of International Relations and Diplomacy, and Rapporteur of the United Nations Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or CEDAW. Secretary Enrique Manalo has served in several key foreign service posts, including as the Philippines' ambassador to the Court of St. James, with concurrent accreditation in Belgium. And just recently, immediately preceding his appointment by President Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr. as Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Enrique A. Manalo served as the Philippines' permanent representative in the United Nations. As an acknowledged expert in multinational diplomatic negotiations and in the internal dynamics of ASEAN, and a fellow UPN, Secretary Manalo holds an AB, Bachelor of Arts, and an MA, Master of Arts in Economics, from the University of the Philippines in Diliman, Quezon City. So I am greatly honored. It is my great honor and distinct privilege to present to you the Secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of the Philippines, the Honorable Enrique A. Manalo.
Thank you very much. Mr. Marco Alfredo Benitez, President of the Philippine Women's University. Dr. Felina Young, Chancellor and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs, PWU. Dr. Benjamin Huegot, PW Professor of International Relations and Diplomacy and our moderator for today. Excellencies, members of the Diplomatic Corps, Ambassador Rosario G. Manalo, Attorney Ricardo Romulo, and members of the Romulo family, Mr. Ores Noosad, the faculty and students of the Philippine Women's University, distinguished guests and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. I am deeply honored to be joining you this morning to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or the UDHR. The UDHR is a seminal document which affirms the inalienable rights and dignity of every individual, irrespective of race, religion, or background. The Philippines, as mentioned just earlier, through the late General Carlos P. Romulo, played a pivotal part in crafting the Declaration, especially its first article, emphasizing that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. And this was a particular point stressed by General Romulo throughout the process of negotiating and drafting the UDHR. In fact, our commitment to upholding human rights predates the Universal Declaration, exemplified by the establishment of the Philippine Women's College in 1919, later recognized as the Philippine Women's University in 1932. And your institution was the first university for women in Asia founded by Asians. PWU embodies gender equality and access to education for all, way before these concepts became widespread. In the current geopolitical landscape, we were reminded every day of the relevance and importance of UDHR. With conflicts in many parts of the world, even today, more than ever, the UDHR remains a beacon for safeguarding our common humanity and promoting dignity and justice for all. 75 years ago, in the aftermath of the Second World War, the Philippines stood with the international community in endorsing the UDHR. The declaration represented a collective vow that the horrors of the past should never be repeated. Conflict has profound impact on the realization of human rights. It creates an environment where basic human rights can be compromised or negated. Civilians caught in conflict often face indiscriminate violence, displacement, and loss of essential services. In such scenarios, the right to live free from fear and want, as articulated in the Declaration, becomes a distant aspiration. In times of conflict, when the very fabric of humanity is tested, it is imperative that we reaffirm our commitment to human rights principles. And it is especially crucial that we prioritize protection of the most vulnerable. For human rights are not a luxury or a privilege reserved for times of peace. Rather, they are the bedrock upon which stable societies and just nations are built. The Philippines recognizes the need to uphold human rights and international humanitarian law principles in preserving human dignity, especially in situations of conflict. Our Constitution renounces war as an instrument of national policy, and we have established an independent national human rights institution, the Commission on Human Rights. And we have ratified 8 core international human rights treaties, as well as key international humanitarian law instruments, such as the Geneva Conventions. While the Philippines, like other nations, has not been immune from conflict, this only strengthens our resolve to promote human rights and international humanitarian law. The Department of Foreign Affairs recently held an outreach program in the city of Marawi, visiting an elementary school in which children were reminded of their rights, especially in times of conflict. Together with local and BARM officials, community leaders, and other government agencies, the Department of Foreign Affairs organized the installation of a large peace mural that commemorates the resilience, hope, and human rights of the people of Marawi. And as we celebrate UDHR and its relevance in times of conflict, Marawi stands an example of the power of the human spirit to rebuild and renew our fundamental faith in human rights. Indeed, our adherence to human rights in the UDHR is deeply rooted in our national identity and is a long-standing Philippine tradition. The Philippines has helped shape not only the UDHR, but also the larger international human rights framework. Throughout our history, the Philippines has been instrumental in pushing for global human rights norms and instruments. In particular, the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, or CEDAW, the Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Their Families, and the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Ambassador Rosario Manalo served and is serving on the CEDAW committee as its chairperson and has been one of the most active members of that committee. Other distinguished Filipino diplomats and experts have also served on UN human rights bodies with distinction, such as Ambassador Jose Brillantes on the Migrant Workers Committee and Professor Virginia Dandan on the Committee on Economic and Social and Cultural Rights. In our own ASEAN region, the Philippines has worked to expand human rights awareness through dialogue, capacity building, and leadership in the creation and in the running of the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. In the multilateral arena, the Philippines continues its open and constructive engagement with UN mechanisms and international partners. In the UN, we remain a strong voice for the protection of the rights of women, migrant children, persons with disabilities, indigenous peoples, and older persons. The Philippines was also an original member of the Human Rights Council in Geneva and also played an active part in developing the procedures, working methods, and other mechanisms of the Council. So it's clear that multilateral cooperation is paramount in addressing the complex nexus between conflict and human rights. The Philippines remains committed to working with the international community to promote peace and ensure that human rights are not just an aspiration, but a reality for all. Looking at emerging human rights challenges, the Philippines continues to live up to its tradition as a trailblazer, being ahead of the curve. President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has described climate change as the greatest existential threat of our time. The Philippines, unfortunately, has long known the detrimental impact of climate change, especially on human rights. And over a decade ago, we pioneered on this topic in the UN Human Rights Council. Today, the world recognizes the need to address the effect of climate change on human rights, especially in terms of its effect on the most vulnerable, including through the recently established Loss and Damage Fund last week at the COP28 in Dubai. President Marcos Jr. has also emphasized the necessity of defining new norms and rules to ensure responsible behavior in cyberspace and to prevent the weaponization of artificial intelligence. And I reiterated this sentiment at the UN General Assembly when I called for partnerships that guarantee that new technologies will not be used to exploit the vulnerable and violate human rights and human dignity. This week, in fact today, the department is hosting a Manila meeting on Indo-Pacific perspectives on autonomous weapons systems that brings together government officials and experts to discuss the ethical and humanitarian dimensions of autonomous weapons. On this issue, the Philippines has once again sided with the cause of human rights and humanity. With a group of other countries, we have called for the prohibition of lethal autonomous weapons as they can easily blur and violate international humanitarian principles and human rights. Ladies and gentlemen, the UDHR provides the anchor for our actions to safeguard human rights and dignity, especially in the face of emerging threats such as those caused by climate change and new technologies. As a responsible member of the international community and true to our human rights and humanitarian tradition, the Philippines shall continue working with our partners to address these threats and bolster the international human rights framework for the benefit of all our peoples and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that talk, Honorable Manalo. Your insights have truly widened our understanding of the complex dynamics surrounding human rights in times of conflict. We would like to request our guests for a quick photo op with the PWU Student Diplomatic Corps and our distinguished people on stage, and also the academic administrators, the ambassadors, and again, the students from the PWU Student Diplomatic Corps. The token of appreciation to be given to the speaker consists of original works created by the student of PWU School of Fine Arts and Design. The Piece Rescued, an AP edition by Cresa Yi Rufon, reflects the artist's fascination with positive news about Philippine wildlife. The artwork emphasizes the importance of community-based conservation initiatives and education to preserve the Philippine eagle. Once again, let's give a big round of applause to Secretary Manalo. We would like to request everyone, the ambassadors, Ambassador Manalo, the students, for the photo opportunity. Once again, a round of applause to our guest speaker. Again, thank you so much to our guest speaker, Secretary Manalo. And now, to add a touch of cultural brilliance to our proceedings, we are honored to present an intermission number by the globally acclaimed and world-renowned Bayanihan Dance Company, the National Dance Company of the Philippines. What an exceptional performance by the Bayanihan Dance Company. It truly exemplifies the Philippines' mastery in cultural diplomacy. Indeed, we are a country with a rich cultural heritage. Now, as we move forward to our next speaker, may I call on once again Professor Muego to introduce our second speaker.
Thank you very much, Harvey. Welcome once again to this morning's program commemorating the 75th anniversary of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. As I said a while ago, arguably one of the greatest and most seminal documents of all time. Our second speaker this morning, the Honorable Oris John William Nowosad, is a senior human rights policy expert and career diplomat who has held various senior diplomatic positions in the United Nations system for more than 2 decades. A Canadian of Ukrainian descent, Mr. Nowosad has an AB in International Relations and Political Science with high distinction from the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and an MA in International Relations cum laude from the Australian National University in Canberra, Australia. His most recent diplomatic posting was that of Senior Human Rights Officer, Human Rights Treaty Bodies Branch, Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, from October 2017 through December 2022. From January 2014 through October 2017, Mr. Nowosad served as chef de cabinet of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And from April 2007 through January 2014, as Chief of the Civil and Political Rights Special Procedures Office of the UN High Commissioner on Human Rights. Before all of that, and from 1990 through 1996, Mr. Nouassad served in various high-level executive capacities in the federal government of Canada in Ottawa, Canada. Secretary of Excellencies, again, Attorney Romulo and other members of the Romulo family, President Benitez, Ambassador Manalo, distinguished guests, members of the faculty, ladies and gentlemen, I'm highly honored to present to you the Honorable Orest John William Nouassad.
Mr. President, Excellencies, the distinguished family of General Carlos P. Romulo, what a great pleasure to be here. Ambassador Rosario G. Manalo, who's a dear friend, and the Secretary, who I had the pleasure of working with in establishing the Human Rights Council. It was a very difficult and challenging time, but it was a privilege and an honor to do so. And what a beautiful room to be in, and what a beautiful presentation. So I hope I won't bore you. I will try and pick up on some of the points that the Secretary raised. But because I'm at this university which focuses on women's rights, in terms of the presentation I'm going to give today, and I want to thank the moderator for introducing me so eloquently and so kindly, I want to focus on a number of points dealing mostly with women's rights, but also in times of conflict. And you will hear a personal perspective because I was picked up on by the Czech ambassador of my Vyshyvanka, which is very similar to the dress here, but it reflects also my personal history. So first, I want to thank Ambassador Manalo, Rosario G. Manalo, because the reason I'm here is over a lunch on the outskirts of Geneva, we discussed the family and the work on the UDHR done by General Carlos P. Romulo. And it was a fascinating conversation. And we've drafted a manuscript on that work, which, inshallah, in hope, will be part of a larger book about the contribution of the Philippines to the international human rights community. And Ambassador Rosario G. Manalo has been very instrumental in that. And luckily, I've had the privilege of working very closely with her as her member of CEDAW. It was interesting. I had a conversation last night with a cousin of mine in Canada, because I'm of Canadian origin. I'm Canadian, but of Ukrainian origin. And my cousin said to me, why is a man coming to a conference at the Philippine Women's University to speak about women's rights? And I said, well, because we're part of the problem. We're also part of the solution, but men should be part of the equation. And we had a discussion over dinner last night. CEDAW has 23 members, 22 women, and only one man. I challenge that. I actually believe that there should be more male representation there so that we can become educated and we can also be transformative, not negating the important role of women. So that's my first point, is the importance of CEDAW and the importance of inclusion and representation, of having everyone on board. So that's why I'm very privileged here, Mr. President, and thank you, to be with younger people because you are the future. And over the last 2 days, we've had a number of discussions. And we all know the role we're playing in the world at the moment. It's a difficult world. It's a very difficult world. But we, as I said yesterday, we must not keep our hands down. We must keep them up. And we must work to bring about change. We've seen a little bit of movement on COP. I'll say a little bit because I'm not actually convinced. But I'm still a positivist. And so I firmly believe that in times of conflict, we must rely on multilateralism. We must rely on the international system. We must rely on the regional systems. We must rely on the national systems. I worked very closely with the late Virginia Dam, who was a member of the Human Rights Commission here in the Philippines. That was my second visit here. I was here once for a visit dealing with the Asian Development Bank. But then with Virginia, we tried to move the national institutions framework forward. And so that's where I want to come back to, is that like Eleanor Roosevelt, we start at the grassroots. We don't start at the top. And if we don't bring the young generation on board, we don't bring the polity on board, all of the wonderful diplomatic work that I've had, thank you, all of the wonderful diplomatic work I've had, if you don't mind, to deal with, thank you, is relevant, and I believe in the institutions, but more importantly, I believe in people. And we've seen that in the people power. I'm not talking about populism, because I'm not a person of populism, but I'm a person of understanding and education. And the other day I was asked a question about social information, the social forum and social media, and how do we manage it. We had a very good conversation with a woman from EGPAT. We must manage it. We must filter. We must listen. We must digest. We must understand what's true and what's not true. Because at the moment, again, with the global situation, there are a lot of global untruths. And so we need to unpack that. Violence against women remains an issue across the globe. I'm not only talking about sexual violence, I'm talking about verbal abuse, other violence. And again, that's where I come back to, how do we deal with it? Men have to be part of that conversation, because men are really at the core of a lot of this violence. I mean, it's not women beating women, it's mostly men. Huh? So, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm a bit tall. So that's where I want to come in. The other element, and we've got youth here, and we're at a university, is that we need to focus on education. Education of men, and education of women, education of children. Because while we have a lot of young women are being educated, it doesn't transform itself into a reality of them being leaders. I read a statistic yesterday, 14% of women are only at the leadership level globally. I'm not talking about the Philippines context, because you know it better than I. But globally, only 14% of women are at the leadership positions. So CEDA has done a lot of work on women in leadership, which is important. And I think we need to continue to focus on that conversation and that discussion. Over the last 2 days, there hasn't been a lot of discussion about the business world. And if you look around Manila and you look around other parts of the world, it's the business community that is a driving force for a lot of change, or a potential driving force for a lot of change. So we need to also empower women to enter the business community, to be able to enter the business community, and to engage the business community on women's empowerment. Similarly, we don't have a lot of women globally in public affairs. I come from a country where there is a good geographic distribution within government of women and men. If you look like a country like Rwanda, it's 50-50. That's impressive. But those are only a few examples, and we need to push more examples. Women in conflict. I'm wearing, as I was by the Czech ambassador, called a vyshyvanka. I'm of Ukrainian descent. I'm hosting a family of 7 refugees from eastern Ukraine. My family comes from western Ukraine. I've seen the direct impact on women in conflict. I have a woman living in my home whose husband is in Ukraine. They're separated. She's forced to raise her 14-year-old son on her own. I have family in Ukraine, close family. The women won't leave because they don't want to leave their husbands. I was recently in Ukraine, and I attended a theater production in Kyiv. It was a fascinating production. It was a comedy, and it was necessary to have that levity. But what struck me was, in the audience, 97% women. They're all on their own, and they're raising their children, and they're dealing with the struggles of knowing that some of their brothers, husbands, other family members are going to die. So it's a personal example, and I just say that women, when there's a conflict situation, in my view, they're the main sufferers. They are the ones that pay the big price for all of these atrocities that we're seeing. And we talked about in the last couple of days about judgment and survival rights. And we need to focus on survival rights, not only in terms of conflict, but as the minister mentioned, also because of the climate paradigm that we're dealing with. And again, who is the main person that's going to suffer? When people migrate because of climate change or because of conflict, the ones often left behind are the women, and they're the ones that are suffering. So we need to keep that as part of a reflection. And as I mentioned, we plan on writing a book. And in part of that, one of the chapters of the book will be the impact of the present discussion on climate change and migration, climate migration, and the intersection with human rights. I just touch on, I won't go into the details because it was mentioned in other discussions we had, but there is a fundamental importance on reproductive health, including in situations of conflict. And the very first event I had, there was a public prayer, and I'm a person of faith. Again, part of that constituency that we need to engage are the faith-based organizations. And I come from North America, where there's tremendous conservatism and divide. And one of the major events, the very first of its kind, was a session of the Committee on the Rights of the Child in Samoa. And what came out in that discussion was that the children said, we're being prevented from engaging on human rights issues by faith-based institutions. Yesterday, we spoke about the Laudato Si. I don't know if you know what that is. That's the papal enunciate about the environment. So there is progress in certain constituencies, but that is another element when I talked about inclusivity that we must bring into the picture. I've discussed already the impact of women on migration. I've touched on it. But I do want to talk about Mr. Briantes was mentioned from the Committee on Migrant Workers. I worked very intimately with Virginia Dandan. So I want to close by, again, talking about having a larger framework. It's very important to work with state-based institutions, but we need to bring it all down. And we need to not give up hope despite problems with the international institutions. We need to continue to construct those institutions. And I had an exchange with my friend Bertie Ramcharan, who was here yesterday, former acting High Commissioner for Human Rights. And we clashed a little bit, but what we agreed is that it's important to have a discussion, and you can agree to disagree, but that can also create thinking that can take you beyond. And we were discussing the COP, the present COP and the future COP, and whether it's worth investing in. We didn't quite agree initially, but I think we did agree in the end that these are valuable instruments. But I come from a very conservative province of Saskatchewan. And when I go home and I talk to my family, they don't really know what the UN is. They don't really know what all of these institutions that we have. They say, there's big bucks put into this, but where are the results? But that's where I come back again. That's where I worked for 11 years on constructing national human rights institutions across the globe. And I firmly believe in that framework. I still believe in the bigger framework, and if we look around this room, the bigger framework is illustrated in these wonderful photos. So, to the youth that are here, don't give up. It's a tough world, but if we work together, we will move it forward. And we saw that with the impressive work of General Carlos P. Romulo, who I pay tribute to. So I salute you all. I thank you for your time and your attention. I'm not as good as the dancers, and I won't be doing that pole thing. But thank you for your time, and a good day to you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nowasad, for contributing to the richness of our discussions and for being an integral part of this significant dialogue on human rights. Your presence has truly enhanced the depth and impact of our symposium. We would like to request for a quick photo opportunity with the PW Student Diplomatic Corps, VIP and guests, ambassadors, the deans and program chairs, the distinguished people on stage, to present for the photo opportunity and to present the token of appreciation to be given to Honorable Nowasad. A piece of work from the PW School of Fine Arts and Design entitled Happiness and Beauty. An AP edition by Julie Ann Baltar explores the peacock as a symbol of beauty, reminding us to embrace and celebrate life's beautiful aspects. The peacock, often seen as an early symbol of happiness and good fortune, transcends simple physical beauty with its lively and dynamic appearance. A round of applause once again to our guest speaker.
But the moment you submit it, you read it back.
Again, we would like to request the VIP, the academic administrators, dean and program chairs, school officials for the photo opportunity. Once again, a round of applause to Honorable Noah Sad. And now, as we take a peek into the windows of history, let us take a moment to pay homage to General Carlos P. Romulo, a Filipino diplomat and one of the Philippines' greatest diplomats of all time. Notably, he played a pivotal role in crafting and eventually adopting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the world body. May we request Attorney Ricardo J. Romulo to give a brief statement.
Yeah, can you adjust? Oh, thanks. President Benitez, distinguished guests, members of the faculty, students, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of my family, I should like to thank each and every one of you for attending this celebration and the commemoration of one of the diplomatic milestones in the history of the world. The adoption by the United Nations of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. 75 years ago, this historic event, which has changed and guided the global mindset vis-à-vis human rights, took place in Paris on 10 December 1948. That the adoption of the UDHR took place in Paris could not have been more symbolic or fitting. After all, it was in Paris, the proverbial city of light, where the storming of the Bastille in 1879 by peasants armed with pitchfork and knives, even as they chanted, "Liberté, equalité, and fraternité," ushered in the French Revolution, which toppled the profligate monarchy and resulted in the adoption of the Declaration of the Rights of Man, arguably a precursor to the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights. While I was only 12 years old at the time, the significance and import of the events leading up to and culminating in the formal adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on 10 December 1948 by an overwhelming vote of 50 in favor, none opposed, and 8 abstentions, was not lost to me nor to my entire family. In retrospect, my family and I are greatly humbled by the pivotal role that my late father, General Carlos P. Romulo, played in the crafting together an eventual adoption of the UDHR, which codified the basic and inalienable rights of all human beings, regardless of race, religion, gender, age, national origin, or the pigmentation of their skin. Legend has it that while the putative moving force behind the document was the former First Lady of the United States, Eleanor Roosevelt, the principal drafter of the document was actually Carlos P. Romulo, a former English professor at the University of the Philippines, and at the time, permanent representative of the Republic of the Philippines to the United Nations. Perhaps as a tacit recognition of the central role that my father played in the drafting and shepherding of the UDHR, through the parliamentary interstices of the United Nations, my father was elected president of the fourth session of the General Assembly in 1949-1950, the first Asian diplomat to be so honored. In closing, I cannot help but notice that as we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the world once again finds itself in the grips of widespread human suffering, penury, and turmoil. I am confident that if my father was still with us today, he would be mortified and deeply anguished by the mindless destruction of the infrastructure and massive losses of human life that have been going on in Ukraine for nearly 2 years. And as we speak, in the Gaza Strip, the Horn of Africa, and in our immediate neighborhood, the massive displacement and killings of civilians and non-combatants in Myanmar. Indeed, I am positive that if my father were alive today, he would be calling upon all of us to unequivocally and totally reaffirm and recommit ourselves to the ideals underlying philosophy of human rights and all that it signifies and stands for. Once again, thank you for recognizing the contributions of my father in helping create and nurture a kinder, more humane, and just world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Attorney Romulo, for that very inspiring message. Again, may we ask our guests for a photo opportunity, the family of General Carlos Romulo, and our guests. Once again, a big round of applause to Attorney Ricardo J. Romulo. Before we move on to our open forum, as this event falls under the Helena C. Benitez School of International Relations and Diplomacy, we wish to extend our deepest gratitude to Ambassador Rosario G. Manalo, who served as a trailblazer for this department at the Philippine Women's University in 2009. Let us all show our appreciation with a resounding round of applause for her inspirational contributions and her iconic status in the field of diplomacy. Ambassador Manalo, would you like to say something to our audience?
Good morning, dear friends of Philippine Women's University. Madam, Mr. President, Madam Vice President, Mr. Nawazad, and my dear friend. I don't know how to express my happiness this morning. Carlos P. Romulo was like a second father to me. And if I learned much about diplomacy, it was because I was a favored officer of my second father, Carlos P. Romulo. He had always been appreciative of what we do, and he would always say, Rosario, you can do more. I was always challenged by the old, wonderful man, and I did my best to satisfy his desire that I would do good. And I do not stop talking about Carlos P. Romulo that I cried so much when he left us and went up to the Lord. One morning while I was in Geneva, my friend Orest and his partner, Mr. Bertie Ramcharan, where we were having lunch. And when Mr. Ramcharan said, "You're a Filipina, Madam Manalo?" I said, "Yes, I'm a Filipina." "Did you know Carlos P. Romulo?" "How can I not know Carlos P. Romulo? He was like my father." And so they said, Mr. Ramcharan, supported by Mr. Nawazad, we are soon celebrating in December 10 the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And Mr. Romulo played an instrumental role for that. I did not know that. I said, pardon my ignorance, but I knew a lot about the greatness of Carlos P. Romulo as the first also among the first Asian president of the General Assembly of the UN. I said, that is one another diamond that I should have known about Carlos P. Romulo. And so Mr. Nawazad and Mr. Ramcharan said, we should be celebrating it, Rosario. So I did some consultations with my son as the Secretary of Foreign Affairs. I lead what he tells me to do or what not to do. And he said, we will need, for our candidature to the Security Council, non-permanent membership, the fact that Romulo was the first General Assembly, we will need a paper that we can carry it out in campaign. And Mr. Nawazad and Mr. Ramcharan started working on what was called a manuscript. And then Mr. Ramcharan said, and Mr. Nawazad, we cannot settle with a manuscript alone because after the election, whether we win or lose, we have so many materials about international human rights. We should be writing a book. And that process of writing the book has already begun through the efforts of Mr. Nawazad. We intend to finish the writing of the book, if possible, before the end of this year. We have sought assistance from various writers. Among them was a Filipina who passed away, Damdam. And she was both close to two gentlemen, particularly Ores, and I knew her because she was one of the top professors in the world of painting at the University of the Philippines. She was going to write, but unfortunately she passed away. Anyway, I leave it to the hands of Mr. Nawazad on how he will carry on writing that book. But I am going to write something about the creation of the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights in that regional organization, in which Carlos P. Romulo would say, Rosario, you are going to take care of Southeast Asia and you build ASEAN. I said, yes, sir. So this is a brief story of why I am so happy that Mr. Ramcharan, when we were having lunch with Ores and myself, said he was a great man, Rosario, and we must have something to remember him. And that's going to be the book. So anybody who could help us when we have need of some assistance, financial-wise or knowledgeable-wise, please come forward and say so. You'll make me very, very happy. Thank you very much for being here, and good morning to all.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Rosario G. Manalo, Dean, Helena C. Benitez School of International Relations and Diplomacy. At this moment, may I call on once again Dr. Muego to facilitate our open forum.
Good morning once again. I understand that we have enough time for about 2 or 3 questions. So I would ask those who are planning to ask questions to speak to the microphone. Do we have a mic on the floor? And to first identify yourself and then ask the question. And of course, address the question to whoever you would like to respond to it. Thank you. So, this is always a suspenseful part of any program, waiting for the first question to be asked. Okay. There you go.
Hello.
Please identify yourself first.
Hi, I'm Ivan Luna. I'm from Bachelor of Science in Nursing. This question is for Mr. Nuwasad. Recently on the Philippine laws, SOGI bill is actually already agreed by some of our government officials. So how does do you think SOGI bill will be a great impact on education sector, and particularly in promoting the safe and exclusive environment of the students? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. There's a bit of an echo, and the acoustics.
Sorry.
Another way of doing this probably would be for you to write the question down, and I can just read it from here. That'd work out better. But please go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you. So, regarding on the recent events of the discussion when it comes on the government in the Philippines, so bill is actually approved with the help of one of our sectors. And I just wanted to know regarding on SOGI bill, how do you think it will be a great impact of education sector, particularly in promoting a safe, inclusive environment, and also benefit a society as a whole?
I think I got the question. Thank you for your question. As we know, SOGI legislation globally is highly controversial. It's not well received in all quarters. And that's where I focused on, in my statement, on inclusivity and the importance of trying to engage with even faith-based organizations. And if you look at Pope Francis, he's tried to move this agenda forward, which is very brave. It might cost him his career, but I mean, he's old enough that I think he'll probably leave before then. I'm a person of human rights, so I do not believe in discrimination on any basis. And I think that's where you need to advocate in terms of education. But it's not an easy fight. You know, as I mentioned, I come from a conservative part of Canada, where even in Canada, SOGI-based legislation isn't well accepted. I would not advocate from an emotional perspective. I would advocate from a human rights-based perspective. If you advocate from an emotional perspective, then people will see it as a personal issue that you're advocating for versus a rights-based approach. So focus on the rights-based approach and focus on the positive messaging. As I just said, Pope Francis has spoken on this. He's trying to open the doors to a discussion on this. But it's not going to be straightforward. And you know, I work in the UN, and in the UN there is also discrimination against persons of certain classes, what you want to call. So again, don't be emotive about it, be rational and forward thinking. That's my comment. Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Nawazad. We could take another question. Please, you go ahead.
Hello, mic test. Good morning, Dr. Muego, and good morning to all our honorable guests. I am Daniela Isabel Granoli, the third-year batch representative of the PWU Student Diplomatic Corps, and I would like to address my question to Sir Honorable Ores Nawasad. It's members of the Foreign Service are expected to defend the national interests of the country that they represent, and that includes upholding the territorial integrity. In this time where territorial disputes are often the root cause of armed conflicts that affect the civilian population, including innocent children, how can the international community apply the UDHR as well as the Geneva Conventions of 1949 to ensure that the human rights of all civilians from warring parties are upheld? Especially that the international law does not have any police power to implement it, and it merely relies on the good faith of state parties that have respective territorial interests to protect. That would be all. Thank you.
Again, a very good question, and I thank you for it. I stress the importance of multilateralism and engagement. I did not discuss what you're dealing with is the importance of diplomacy. In my entire career, even if I had differences of opinions with governments, I engaged them. You must maintain dialogue. And we discussed it over dinner the other night. You don't want to escalate the issues. And you know, I have a very personal issue at the moment. So, but what you want to do is keep the climate cooler, not using air conditioning, I mean in terms of proper terms. But I believe, and I did talk about it, I believe in dialogue, and I believe in having open, constructive, respective discussion. And that's critical. If you engage in open warfare with member states, whether it's yours with another or mine with another, me with, you know, my aggressor of my country, it's not going to necessarily lead to conflict resolution. And that's what you're trying to do. But the basic principle of territorial integrity must be respected, absolutely respected. But to do that, you need to maintain a dialogue. You can't just stand up and scream. That's my thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have another question. Please.
Hi, first of all, I'd like to say good morning to everyone around here, especially to our honorable guest speakers. My name is Janelle Angela C., and I am the Secretary of the Environmental Science Society of the Philippines Women's University. I have a question. I think one of the basic human rights is our rights to nature. It is as well stated in the 1987 Constitution of the Philippines, which is our right to a balanced and healthful ecology in accord with the rhythm and harmony of nature. Philippines is especially vulnerable as part of the Global South to environmental injustice as well as social injustices. What do you think can international organizations like the United Nations can do to protect and uphold these human rights to a good nature? Thank you so much.
Thank you again, a very good question, and something that we actually discussed yesterday because we were dealing with the whole issue of climate change. And one of the chapters we've agreed that will be in the book will deal with the issue of climate change and migration. I don't think you should only think about what the United Nations can do, but what we can do at the national, global, at the personal level. We talked, and we haven't thought this through yet. Mr. Ramchandran and I discussed about possibly putting an initiative forward to the Security Council, to the broader Security Council, not just the PERM 5, about looking at a broader perspective on climate change and global warming. But as I mentioned, so that's a bigger project, and it's not just for the Philippines, but it's a bigger constituency. Because my perspective is that there's a lot of I will use less diplomatic talk, but a lot of blah blah about this issue, but not a lot of action. So one of the points I mentioned yesterday was also engaging the business and private sector, because they're the ones that control the fossil fuels. I come from a fossil fuel area, and it's not my government because I don't live there anymore, but the premier of my province is not keen on transforming climate change because there's money involved. But if you can get involved, the business community, to recognize that we can move to more sustainable development, more renewable energies, and that can be also a financial benefit, then that's important. And I referred to the meeting we had in Samoa with the children. They all cried out for help about climate change because, like you, a country with an archipelago, islands are disappearing. And some of those children will lose their country. They'll move to New Zealand, they'll move to Australia, they'll move somewhere else, but they won't have their states any longer. So continue to speak out, but again, as I said in the earlier intervention, not with an emotive speak, but with a rational speak. And strategically, we need to work through this. I don't think the international community has yet, as we've just seen in the COP discussions, has really worked through this. There are vested interests. There are countries that are using resource-based finances to fuel conflict, to pay, to bomb other peoples. That's a reality. And we've seen recent discussions in the Middle East, in the Gulf in particular. But as I said, don't put your hands down, keep your hands up, and not just talk, but walk the talk. And when I looked at Manila and the traffic situation in this country, not great, you know? So we need to be forward thinking. I'm firmly convinced that renewable energy is the way to move forward. Firmly convinced, although I'm not from a country that believes that in the same way. But there's my short answer to your question. It's maybe not sufficient, but that's where I am. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nawasad. That concludes the open forum portion of today's program. And I now call back Professor Adamson to the podium.
Thank you, Dr. Muego. Again, a round of applause to our guest speakers and to Dr. Muego for facilitating our open forum. As we approach the conclusion of our time together, we now invite Dr. Felina C. Young, the Chancellor and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs at the Philippine Women's University, to deliver her closing remarks.
Our dear guest speakers, members of the Diplomatic Corps, our dear administrators, President Marco, our dear President, our dear faculty, non-teaching staff, as we conclude the commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we are very happy to have this momentous occasion. In behalf of our PWU community, we are more than glad and privileged to have our guests today to celebrate this particular occasion. There are certain things that we'd like to emphasize today. Number one, we reiterate the human rights and freedoms that belong to every person in the world from birth to death. Secondly, human rights and freedom applies regardless to where we were born, what we believe in, and how we choose to live our lives. And thirdly, it is more than ever relevant today that we listen and we read and we try to experience some of the pitiful plight of our people all over the world. So very relevant, of course, is the Ukraine war, the Israel and Gaza war, and maybe in certain areas that are not conscious and visible to us. And so we see instances of discrimination. We see instances of genocide. We see instances of violation of women's rights. There are many occasions that we are not privy to, but in our own respective environment, we are able to encounter such transgression of human rights and freedom. And therefore today, we stand committed. The PWU community pledges commitment to our students. Because we are in the field of education, our mission is really to offer quality education and excellence to our students. We commit and we pledge that we will respect the human rights, most especially of our students, and of course our faculty and non-teaching staff. And that is where the direction is where we are going to, because PWU as an institution will have to have its part in the entire national and global community. So we are here for our community involvement, our environmental projects that are very active, at the same time, taking care of the simple challenges and problems of our students. And I guess in that light, we'd like to say thank you to everyone for being around. We are so privileged, we're so happy that, with the facilitation of Ambassador Manalo here and the entire PWU community, we are very happy and we welcome and we say thank you to each one of you. Maraming salamat. Mabuhay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Felina Young. Now may I request everyone to stand for the PWU hymn.
Let the thunder of the great stars of the God
Ladies and gentlemen, as we immerse ourselves in the profundity of our shared commitment to human rights, let this event be a testament to our collective resolve to safeguard humanity in times of conflict. May the echoes of our discussions resonate far beyond this hall, inspiring positive change in the world we inhabit. See you again in our future. I'm Mark Harvey Adamson, and as patriots, let us value the human rights and be compassionate to one another. Have a great day, everyone. Please don't forget to rate this event or evaluate this event. You can see the QR code at the screen, and we will be sending it via email. Thank you once again.